The morning sun cast long shadows across Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport as Jerome Washington adjusted his simple navy blazer and checked his boarding pass one final time. Flight 447 to Seattle, Seat 1A First Class. He'd debated this decision for weeks, knowing what it might bring, but understanding it was necessary. At 45, Jerome had learned that the world would test him in ways it would never test others, and today would be no exception. Jerome carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had earned everything through merit alone. His weathered hands, calloused from years of building aircraft prototypes in his garage before his engineering career took off, now held a boarding pass that represented more than just a seat on a plane. It was a test, one he hoped his airline would pass. The gate area buzzed with the typical chaos of business travelers and vacationers. Jerome noticed the sideways glances as he stood in the priority boarding line, the subtle shifting away, the whispered conversations that stopped when he looked in their direction. He'd grown accustomed to being the only black face in first class, but it never stopped stinging. What these passengers didn't know was that Jerome Washington had designed the very safety systems that would keep them alive 35,000 feet above the ground. As boarding commenced, Jerome made his way down the jet bridge with measured steps. He knew that in a few hours everything would change. But first, he had to see how his own airline treated passengers who looked like him when they didn't know who he was watching. The aircraft's interior gleamed with polished surfaces and leather seats that cost more than some people made in a month. Jerome located seat 1A and settled in, placing his worn messenger bag in the overhead compartment. The bag contained sketches for his latest aircraft design innovations, but to any observer it looked like the belongings of a man who might have gotten lucky with an upgrade, rather than someone who belonged in first class. That's when Patricia Blackwell made her entrance. She swept into first class like a woman who owned the world, her Chanel purse swinging with practiced authority, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair catching the cabin lights. Diamond earrings sparkled as she surveyed the cabin with the calculating gaze of someone who viewed everything through the lens of personal entitlement. Her eyes landed on Jerome, and her expression shifted from mild interest to poorly concealed disgust. "Excuse me," Patricia announced loudly enough for the entire first-class section to hear. "There's obviously been some mistake here." She gestured toward Jerome as if he were a piece of misplaced luggage. "This section is for premium passengers only." Jerome looked up from his safety card with patient eyes that had seen this scenario play out countless times before. "Good morning, ma'am. I believe my seat assignment is correct." He held up his boarding pass with steady hands that betrayed none of the familiar disappointment settling in his chest. Patricia's voice rose another octave, drawing the attention of every passenger within earshot. "I don't care what that little piece of paper says. You clearly don't belong here. Someone needs to fix this immediately." She snapped her fingers toward the galley where flight attendant Michelle was completing her pre-flight preparations. Michelle, a young woman who had joined Meridian Airlines fresh out of training, approached with visible reluctance. She'd been warned about situations like this in diversity training, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" "Yes, there's definitely a problem," Patricia declared, her voice dripping with the confidence that came from a lifetime of getting her way. "This person is in first class, and I'm highly uncomfortable with the situation. I pay far too much money for these tickets to have to deal with this kind of element." The cabin fell silent except for the low hum of the aircraft's systems. Other passengers turned in their seats, some with curiosity, others with embarrassment at witnessing such naked prejudice. A few pulled out their phones, recognizing that they were witnessing something that would likely make headlines. Jerome remained seated, his hands folded calmly in his lap. "Ma'am, I purchased this ticket through the proper channels. I have every right to be here." His voice carried the measured tone of someone who had learned that responding to hatred with anger only made things worse. "Rights?" Patricia laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Let me tell you about rights. I've been flying first class for 20 years. I've spent more money with this airline than you'll probably make in a lifetime. I have platinum status, and I demand that you be moved immediately." Michelle found herself caught between company policy and human decency. "Sir, may I see your identification and boarding pass?" she asked apologetically, knowing that she would never make such a request of a white passenger. Jerome complied without complaint, producing documents that clearly showed his legitimate claim to seat 1A. But Patricia wasn't finished. Those could be fake. "Do you have any idea how easy it is to forge these things? I'm telling you, there's no way someone like him could afford first class unless something shady is going on." The accusations hung in the air like poison. Jerome felt the familiar weight of being presumed guilty until proven innocent, of having his character and integrity questioned simply because of the color of his skin. Around him, passengers shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement with Patricia's assessment, others looking away in shame at their silence. "Ma'am," Michelle began, trying to find middle ground, "the gentleman's documents appear to be in order." "Then call security," Patricia interrupted. "I'm not flying next to someone who makes me feel unsafe. And if you don't handle this immediately, I'll be calling my lawyer and the CEO of this airline. Do you have any idea who I am?" As Patricia's tirade continued, Jerome noticed movement from several rows back. 8-year-old Timothy Chen was traveling alone to Seattle to visit his father, a common arrangement following his parents' divorce. The boy had been quietly reading when the confrontation began, but now he was watching with wide, concerned eyes. Timothy recognized the man in seat 1A, though Jerome couldn't know that yet. The child had seen Jerome's photograph in his father's office many times, had heard stories about the brilliant engineer who had revolutionized aircraft safety systems and saved countless lives. But Timothy was too young to fully understand the racial dynamics playing out before him, only that a kind-looking man was being treated cruelly for no reason he could comprehend. The situation escalated when 2 airport security officers boarded the aircraft. Patricia had made good on her threat, using her platinum status and threats of litigation to force the airline's hand. The officers, both white men in their 40s, approached Jerome's seat with the weary resignation of people who had dealt with similar complaints before. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," one officer said, his hand resting casually on his radio. "There's been a complaint filed, and we need to sort this out at the gate." Jerome looked up at the officers, then at Patricia's triumphant expression, then at the faces of the other passengers who were either recording the incident or deliberately avoiding eye contact. This was the moment he had anticipated, the test that would reveal the true character of the airline he now owned. He was about to speak when Timothy's distressed voice cut through the tension. "I can't breathe," the boy gasped, his small hands clutching at his throat. "Something's wrong." The confrontation over Jerome's seat was instantly forgotten as Timothy began showing clear signs of a severe allergic reaction. His face was swelling rapidly and his breathing became increasingly labored. Panic spread through the first-class cabin as passengers realized they were witnessing a medical emergency. "He's having an allergic reaction," Michelle called out, rushing toward the boy. "Does anyone have medical training?" Timothy's condition deteriorated rapidly. His lips were turning blue and his gasps for air became weaker. His EpiPen stored in his backpack had malfunctioned when Michelle tried to use it, leaving the child without the medication that could save his life. While passengers fumbled with their phones and Michelle frantically searched for medical supplies, Jerome quietly unbuckled his seatbelt and moved toward Timothy. His calm, measured approach was a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. "Son, can you hear me?" Jerome asked, kneeling beside the boy's seat. His voice carried an authority that cut through the panic. "My name is Jerome. I'm going to help you, but I need you to try to stay calm." Jerome's hands moved with practiced precision as he assessed Timothy's condition. He directed Michelle to find the aircraft's emergency medical kit while simultaneously coordinating with the cockpit to establish communication with ground medical services. His commands were clear, professional, and delivered with the confidence of someone who had dealt with life-and-death situations before. "Apply pressure here," he instructed another passenger, showing them exactly where to position their hands. "Michelle, I need you to find alternative antihistamines in the medical kit, the yellow container, second compartment." As Jerome worked to stabilize Timothy, something remarkable happened. The passengers who had been recording his humiliation just moments before now watched in amazement as he demonstrated knowledge and skills that contradicted every assumption they had made about him. This wasn't just basic first aid. Jerome was displaying the kind of medical expertise typically found in emergency rooms or military field hospitals. "Why does he know so much?" Patricia whispered to another passenger, her earlier bravado replaced by confusion. Jerome continued his work with Timothy, using techniques he had learned during his years developing safety protocols for aircraft emergencies. He had studied human physiology extensively to better understand how his engineering innovations could protect passengers during medical crises at high altitude. That knowledge was now saving a child's life. As Timothy's breathing gradually stabilized, he looked up at Jerome with grateful eyes and whispered something that only Jerome could hear. "My daddy says you're the smartest man he knows. He has your picture in his office." Jerome's expression softened with understanding, but he simply smiled and said, "Your father is very kind, son. Just rest now." Patricia, still oblivious to the significance of Timothy's words, grew impatient with the delay. "This is ridiculous," she complained loudly. "I have an extremely important meeting in Seattle. Can't we just have paramedics meet us there? I can't afford to miss this flight." Her callousness in the face of a child's medical emergency revealed the true depth of her character, and even passengers who had initially supported her began to distance themselves from her complaints. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom as Timothy's condition continued to improve under Jerome's care. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a slight delay while we ensure our young passenger receives proper medical attention. I want to thank everyone for their patience during this situation." Then the captain's voice returned with an announcement that would change everything. "I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge a very special passenger we have aboard today. Mr. Jerome Washington, currently in Seat 1A, is not just any traveler. He's the chief aerospace engineer who designed the revolutionary safety systems that have prevented over 10,000 deaths in commercial aviation over the past decade." The cabin fell completely silent. Patricia's face drained of color. Captain Rodriguez continued, his voice carrying a note of pride. "Mr. Washington is also the new majority owner of Meridian Airlines, having recently inherited his father's aviation empire. He's been flying on our aircraft to personally evaluate the passenger experience and our commitment to treating all customers with dignity and respect." The revelation hit the cabin like a shockwave. Passengers who had watched Jerome being humiliated now realized they had witnessed the owner of the airline being subjected to racial discrimination by his own staff and fellow passengers. The implications were staggering. Patricia's pharmaceutical company, Blackwell Industries, held major contracts with Meridian Airlines for transporting temperature-sensitive medications worldwide. Her behavior toward Jerome hadn't just been morally reprehensible, it had potentially destroyed her company's most valuable business relationship. The passengers who had recorded her tirade had already begun sharing the videos on social media, where they were rapidly going viral. Jerome, still kneeling beside Timothy, looked up at the cabin full of stunned faces. He could have chosen this moment for revenge, could have used his newfound revealed power to destroy Patricia and everyone who had remained silent during his humiliation. Instead, he slowly stood and addressed the cabin with the same quiet dignity he had maintained throughout the ordeal. "What you witnessed today," Jerome began, his voice carrying to every corner of the first-class section, "happens to people who look like me every single day, in airports and boardrooms, in neighborhoods, and in countless other places where we're presumed not to belong. But I want you to understand something important. A person's worth isn't determined by the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or how much money they display. It's determined by their character and their actions." He turned to face Patricia directly, his eyes holding no anger, only sadness. "Ma'am, what you did today was wrong. You tried to have me removed from a seat I had every right to occupy, based solely on your prejudices and assumptions. But I want you to know something. I forgive you." Patricia's hands trembled as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. "Mr. Washington, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Jerome held up a gentle hand. I hope you'll remember this moment. I hope it will make you think twice before you treat another human being the way you treated me today, because that person might be someone's father, someone's son, someone who has dedicated their life to making the world safer for everyone, including you. The passengers around them listened in amazement as Jerome continued. I could use my position to retaliate, to make your life difficult, to destroy your business relationships, but that's not who I am. Instead, I'm going to use this experience to make Meridian Airlines better. We're going to implement new training programs, new policies, and new accountability measures to ensure that no passenger ever experiences what I experienced today. Jerome announced that flight attendant Michelle would be promoted to the corporate training department, recognizing her attempts to handle an impossible situation with as much grace as company policy allowed. He also revealed his intention to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged students pursuing careers in aviation, to be named in honor of Timothy, whose medical emergency had revealed the true character of everyone involved. As paramedics boarded to ensure Timothy was stable for the flight, the boy squeezed Jerome's hand and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Jerome smiled and replied, "Thank you for reminding me why this work matters." Patricia, humbled beyond words, quietly requested to be moved to economy class for the remainder of the flight. She spent the journey in reflection, realizing that her sense of superiority had been built on nothing more than prejudice and privilege, while the man she had tried to humiliate had earned his success through intelligence, dedication, and service to others. When Flight 447 finally departed for Seattle, Jerome returned to seat 1A and pulled out his worn notebook, the same one he had carried since his engineering school days. He began sketching new designs for aircraft safety systems, his mind already working on innovations that would save lives for generations to come. The other passengers, their perspectives forever changed, watched him work with newfound respect and understanding. They had boarded the plane thinking they knew what success looked like, what belonging meant, and who deserved their consideration. They disembarked knowing that they had been wrong about everything. As the aircraft climbed toward its cruising altitude, Jerome looked out the window at the clouds below and reflected on the day's events. He could have chosen revenge, could have used his power to destroy those who had wronged him. Instead, he had chosen grace, forgiveness, and the harder path of using his experience to create positive change. The story of Flight 447 would spread far beyond social media, becoming a catalyst for conversations about dignity, respect, and the danger of judging others by their appearances. Jerome Washington had proven that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is unexpected kindness, and that true strength lies not in the to retaliate, but in the wisdom to transform painful experiences into opportunities for growth and understanding. In a world too often divided by prejudice and assumption, Jerome had shown that one person's choice to respond to cruelty with compassion could change hearts, minds, and the very culture of an organization. Flight 447 had been delayed by discrimination and medical emergency, but it ultimately arrived at its destination carrying passengers who were forever changed by witnessing the power of grace in action.